So we are going to start building out some actions, reducers and constraint right now and start actually updating our store. So what I am going to do is I am just going to go through start building these out. I will explain as I go. And for those of you guys that have a harder time grasping this, maybe you are newer to Redux or have not worked with it before, I would recommend just following along and as we progress through this, you will uh, start seeing how things work and start will to make sense because this is hard to explain without actually just showing you and showing you how things works. So if it does not make sense right away, just follow along. And then once we finish up the code, I will try to review and I will recommend just going back through it yourself and trying to understand what it's actually this. So let's go back into our folder here into our front end and source. We are going to create a folder for our reducers. So this will be reducers and we are going to store multiple reducers here. So the first one is going to be a product reducers and this is where we update the products part. So product part of our state. So we are going to update the product list. So maybe we want to get an individual product for a product page. This is where all the product reducers are going to sit. And then we'll build out different files for different parts of our state here. So let's create this and we'll call this product reducers and I will camel case that and this will be product reducers.js. So before we start with our reducers, let me try to explain what this is and then we'll just use to creating it. So a reducer is simply a function that takes in our current state and it's going to take in an action of what we want to do to this state. So the action would be like load data, or it's going to tell us that we got back an error when we were loading our data, and depending on what that action type is, we are just going to change and manipulate the state. So the function is going to take in a state and an action type. It's going to manipulate our state or a certain part of our state and it's going to return back a new copy into our store. So it's just going to update our store. The reducer is what actually updates our store. So let's just start creating that and we are going to use an arrow function and I am going to go to product list reducer and this page is going to have multiple reducers. So this is going to be for, let me just finish this up. Actually reducers, this page right here or this file is going to have multiple reducers. So we are going to have one for our product list and then later on we will have one to update our actual product or our individual product for our product page and so on. So we are going to have multiple reducers to update different parts of our actual state. So let's start by doing this. We'll take in the state right now and our state when we first start is going to have an empty list of products. So it's going to be an empty way, empty array. Okay, array. And we are also going to take in the action type which will be an object. Now once we get these two values, we are updating only this part of the state. So we are not updating the entire state. So what we need to do is we need to write a switch statement. And in the switch statement, we'll want to check the action type and then change what we do depending on what this action type is. So we are going to take in this project, we are going to check action dot type and we want to set some cases here. So the first case is going to be if the products are loading. So we are going to say product underscore list underscore request. Okay. So later on you will see how we actually pass in the action type here. But when we are requesting data, what we want to do is we want to return back this object into our state. So we are going to update our state to these values right here. So we are going to say loading, and as we are loading, this is true because we are loading in data, and our products array will be set to an empty array right there because we are still loading in data. So now the second case, remember these will be triggered one by one as we are actually making requests and as we are updating from the front end. So we'll just pass in product list request and we will change this to success. So this is when our API call returns back. Some data loading will be set to false because we loaded in that data and now our products will be set. So set to not the empty array but the action dot payload. So we are going to return back a payload of data, and this is what we get back from the API call is that payload. We now updated our products array, so our state will have a list of product when this is successful. And the last state we want to load in is when we fail. So let's say something happened, we got the bad data, we didn't have the credentials or whatever it happens. So we want to say product list fail and loading will be set to false because we already loaded the data. Okay. It just was not correct. So we want to just go ahead and return back action payload and we want to set the error for the response. Here, let me just see if that's working. There we go. So error, I don't know why it's doing console.log error, but I will just remove that. So we are still going to have our products array, but it's going to be empty. But now we are going to add this attribute error and we are going to pass in the response from our payload. And we also want to return back a default value. So if for some reason one of our switch cases don't match one of these right here, we just want to return back the initial value, initial state. So we'll just do return and then pass in what the initial state value was right here. And I just realized that should be reducer and we need an equal symbol. So this product list reducer and we need to export this now so we can add this into our stored.js file, into our combine reducers function. So let's just import that. We'll just do import from dot forward slash reducers and we are going to go into product reducers and and let's pass in product list reducers and I am going to throw that into my combine reducers. So combine reducer function, right? So I will just do product list and I can throw in that reducer. And later on, when we add in multiple reducers, we'll just throw them in like this and change up those values. And this reducer has officially added a value to my state. So initial state is set to an empty object right now. But because we triggered this reducer, we set products to our initial state. So by using this combined reducer and throwing it in here, we trigger the first call of that reducer. And now if I look up my Redux dev tools, if I refresh this, I can see my state and now we have that uh, products list and the actual product. So the reducer just updated my state. So now what we want to do is actually add some actions to that reducer, load in some data. But before we do that, I want to use constants. So we technically don't need constants, but we are going to be using these in later parts of our code. So I want to create some variables. So if we happen to make some changes or anything like that, or something goes wrong with it, I don't have to go and update this code everywhere. So we are going to use constants, and for that I am just going to create a new folder. I am going to call this constants, and in here I'm going to create a file called productconstants.js. So all we are going to have is some variables pointing to string values. So I'm just going to changes up these string values with the variables, and then it will import them. So let's start by exporting them, and then we'll just create the variable and the actual name. And for this, I'm just going to set the string value. So they are going to be the same thing as what we have here. So let's just repeat this, and we will do this two more times. So product list, and then we'll do product list request or success, and I will change the value, and then fail. Throw that in here, and all we need to do now is import these constants and change these values. uh, so let's just go ahead and import from constants. So we'll do dot forward slash constants, and then we will just do forward slash product constants. So product constant, and then let's actually throw in these values. So I'll just copy and paste these. We'll just do the first one. I'll actually set some indentation here. We'll throw in the first one, and then we'll just repeat this, and let's change success and fail case, fail success, fail. I'm just copying and pasting, and to actually use these, I'm just going to save this, and we are just going to remove the string value. So now if we want to change this, all we do is go into this file, we change something up here, we fix something, and it makes this a lot cleaner. So let's remove that quit there, save that or remove that. And I just want to save it and make sure it's still working. So I will refresh this, everything checks out. So our state is still good. So let's go ahead and move on to our actions. So for our actions, I want to create a new folder. Now that our constants are set up, I'm actually going to, we'll do that in a second. So we'll create a new folder. We'll call this actions, and I will call this one product actions. So new file in actions, product actions.js, we'll create that, and I'm going to need these constants in that file. So before we actually start creating our first action, let's paste this in, save it, and I am going to create my first action function, and then I'm going to try to explain what actually happening here. So this is going to be an arrow function, and I'm going to call this function list products. So this function is going to be in charge of replacing the API call that we made in our home screen. So So instead of calling the data, let's actually close out constant. So we'll go into screens, home screen. So instead of making this API call from our home screen component, we are going to make it from list. So from list products action. So we are going to take this action right here, and we are going to move it in here into our action. Then from our home screen, instead of doing this right here, we are going to trigger this list action or list products, and action from our home screen. So and we are going to call that. So the action will now be in charge of making this call in this action. Once we actually get back that data, we are going to dispatch our product reducer, and this is where we throw in the action type, the data that we get back. And then this reducer will update our state. Now in here, I want to be able to make some asynchronous request. So this is where Redux Thunk comes in. So what Redux Thunk allows us to do is to make a function within a function here. So we are going to write async after this first arrow, and after our parenthesis, we are going to add in another arrow function right there, and in here we are just going to pass in dispatch. So dispatch is what we are going to use to dispatch these actions right here. And we are going to use this within our list product action. So the first thing I want to do is write a try catch. So I want to set the try. So we'll set catch and we'll get ready to catch that error and actually output it if we need. So we'll just do error. And inside of try is where I want to dispatch my first action. So we'll just do dispatch. We are going to use this function right here, and inside of dispatch, I'm going to pass in an object. So the type is going to be, we'll just throw in the product list request. So we'll throw that in, and this is going to fire off my first reducer. So if we go into the reducers, it is going to fire off this. So it's going to set loading to true, and we are going to have an empty array of sort this. Now what we want to do next right after this is we actually want to make an API call and load up the data, then actually call product list success. So in here, because we are going to be making an API call, let's go ahead and import Axios. So Axios, and we will throw in Axios right here. So we get Axios and we want to make that call. So what I am going to do is actually just go into my home screen, and we are just going to take this right here. So we are going to make that call. So we are going to use await. We are going to destructure it, return that data, and that's going to be thrown in right here. So if anything goes wrong with this API call, we are going to trigger that error, and then we can dispatch product list fail. But if everything goes correctly, all we need to do is dispatch the success call. So we are just going to do dispatch, and this is going to be a function with an object in it. Just like we did a second ago with our product list request, and we are going to use success. So we'll just do the action type, and we are going to throw in success, and now we want to throw in the payload. So payload, and that's going to be the data that we return from that call. So this is going to dispatch this reducer right here. So we'll go into product reducer, and we are going to call product list success now. And for products, we are throwing in that payload, which is right here. So we are taking that data, we are throwing that in, and now we officially load up the state with that data. So if we get an error, if something goes wrong with this, we want to dispatch this error. So let's just do dispatch, and we'll throw in the type or the object and the type of error. So we'll just do type, and we are going to pass in product list fail. So we'll throw in product list fail, and then for the actual error message or for the payload, let's throw into payload. And within this payload, I want to return back the response message to the user. So there is going to be times where we have the generic response and then a custom response. So I wanted to be able to check for this, have an if statement that looks for it and then changes what that response is depending on what the back end gives us. So we are just going to check if we have one. So we are going to say if error message, so error dot response dot data dot message. So if we have a custom message, go ahead and return that. So we are just going to set the ternary operator, and we are just going to do error dot response uh, uh, dot data dot message, and we are going to pass that in. And if we don't, we'll just pass in the generic one. So we'll just do error message. So we'll throw in the comma there, and this is response that we are going to use for all of our actions. So this is pretty generic. And in here, just to recap what's going on, we are going to take that error message, and we are going to throw that into a reducer. So if we get back a fail, we are going to set the state value of error, and we are going to throw in that response message. So at this point, we are not actually firing this action off yet. We want to start actually using this in our home screen. So we built it out, and in the next video, we are going to start firing it off from our home screen. So we are going to remove all of this. We are going to import this list product action, and we are going to use that inside of use effect.